You remember the smell before the fire, not the smoke, but the strange sweetness of something about to vanish. She stood there barefoot, watching it all burn, not with fear, not with sorrow, but with recognition, as if she'd been here before, as if this was where she was born. You can't recall when this memory began, only that it follows you, like a scent behind your ribs, like a room behind your eyes. You once believed she wanted your peace, but peace is what she burns. It insults her. You offered her order, and she grew silent. You gave her certainty, and she disappeared. You never saw what she needed, not safety, but something that bleeds, something that cracks, something that listens without answering. And now the dream repeats. Always the same fire. Always the same silence. Always her, watching you, waiting for the moment you stop saving her and begin vanishing with her. You speak to her as if you know what she wants. You build a world of symmetry, routines, definitions, declarations, but you never ask why her gaze drifts away when you finish speaking. You think you are showing strength when you offer her structure, but she sees a cage. Not for herself, no. She's already lived among invisible bars. She sees a cage around you, and it sickens her, because you've hidden from the very thing she secretly lives for. You've made yourself into a clean machine, and she is not looking for a machine. She's looking for the man who still has dirt under his nails from clawing through his own dreams, and she can smell it when you haven't bled for anything real. She leans closer to chaos because it listens, because it reacts, because it feels. She doesn't want you to be safe. She wants you to be awake. You call her irrational because she follows the pulse beneath the facts. You call her unstable because you cannot map her rhythm with your calendar. But she is not inconsistent. She is responsive. You are the one who clings to certainties like a drowning man clings to a lie. Certainty is your security blanket. You cover your fears with blueprints and plans and noble phrases, but she hears the panic in your voice when she steps outside your schema. She hears it and tests it. You mistake her testing for cruelty, but it is curiosity. She is asking, will you follow me into the unknown, or will you try to trap me in the familiar? And when you choose the latter, when you offer her the safety of the known, she quietly dies a little. Not because safety is wrong, but because safety is your religion, and she has already outgrown gods that don't tremble. You forget where she comes from. You forget the womb is not a place of light. It is a place of darkness, of shapeless growth, of strange tides and invisible wars. She is not afraid of chaos because she was born from it, and in her body she carries its memory. When she moves, she returns. You think you're making love, but she is summoning. She listens for the voice in you that you buried when you learned how to explain yourself. She waits not for your compliments, not for your promises, but for your crack. The crack in your logic, the twitch in your composure, the accidental confession of fear that leaks out when your hands shake ever so slightly. That's when she feels you. That's when she opens. That's when her breath slows and her eyes dilate, not because you are perfect, but because for a second you were real. You want her to love your consistency, but what if she loves your chaos? Not the performative kind, not the angry boy masquerading as a beast, but the deep, wordless chaos that swirls beneath your masks, the one you've never dared name, the chaos of longing, of hunger, of not knowing who you are without the roles. She feels that in you, and sometimes it terrifies her, not because she doesn't want it, but because she can't own it. And that's what makes it holy. You think she wants to possess you. No, she wants to see you and then disappear, like mist, like breath, like firelight flickering through a cracked wall. She is not here to keep you. She is here to wake you. You bring her flowers and she thanks you, but she is watching how you place them. You give her compliments and she smiles, but she is listening to how your voice falters. You create comfort and call it love, but she is waiting to see if you'll break it yourself. Not to hurt her, but to prove it never owned you. You think love means stability, but to her, love is permission. Permission to burn, to change, to collapse, and reform. She doesn't respect the man who keeps it together. She respects the man who lets it fall apart with grace, not recklessly, not melodramatically, but with full, conscious surrender. She doesn't want you to collapse into her. She wants you to collapse into yourself, so she can meet the version of you that no longer needs applause for being good. You've been taught to earn her affection with predictability, but she grew up navigating silence, shadows, subtle punishments. She learned to feel the undercurrent while the surface stayed calm. So now, when you smile too much, she wonders what you're hiding. When you never get angry, she suspects you're repressing a monster. When you always agree, she knows you've been trained, not awakened. She wants to be with someone who won't flinch when she shows her edge. And how can you meet her edge if you have never kissed your own? She is not cruel. She is simply bored of ghosts pretending to be men. She will test you not to hurt you, but to wake you. And if you flinch too soon, she leaves. Not always physically. Sometimes she stays, but not all of her. She becomes polite, distant, and you call it respect. But her respect is never polite. It is hungry. It is chaotic. It is irrational, erotic, wordless. Her true respect is what she gives to the man who walks into her fire, not to fix her, but to feel her heat, to kneel inside it and say, "Here I am." No armor, no scripts, and then wait. Wait without asking to be thanked, without asking to be rewarded. Just wait, as if the chaos were not a test, but a temple, a place you visit when you no longer need to be saved. A place you remember when all the right answers rot. You've mistaken peace for control, but she does not want peace. She wants presence, and presence is not born from certainty. Presence is born from risk, from choosing to stay when everything in you wants to run. When your mind tells you to fix her, and instead, you simply witness, not as a hero, but as a mirror, the kind that reflects her without distortion, that does not fear her ugliness, that does not flinch when her beauty turns violent. She knows she is not easy. She does not want to be easy. She wants to be true, and only a man who has tasted his own chaos can hold hers without judgment. You were told women love stability. That's a lie told by men who fear being devoured. She doesn't want your order. She wants to see if you'll survive her disorder, and not as a victim, not as a martyr, but as a willing witness, a participant, a man who says, "I see your storm, and I do not seek shelter. I will stand here and let it carve me," because deep down, she is waiting for that. Not safety, not comfort, but depth. Depth without panic, fire without arrogance. A man who doesn't extinguish her chaos, but answers it with a chaos of his own. And if you can't do that, she will find someone who can. Maybe not with words, maybe not with promises, but with presence, with a silence that doesn't recoil, with a touch that doesn't demand, with a gaze that doesn't domesticate. And when she finds him, you will watch her laugh in ways you've never seen. You will see her kneel not because she's weak, but because she's finally met someone who didn't try to tame her. And you will call it madness. But it was never madness. It was a mirror, one you refused to look into, one you mistook for danger. But it was her, and you never stayed long enough to see her bloom in the dark. You want to be the provider, the protector, the predictable foundation beneath her feet. But you've mistaken roles for reality. She is not looking for a father figure to stabilize her world. She is tearing down every false father she's ever been forced to worship. And you, with your calm voice, your logical structure, your obsession with being understood, you remind her of the ones who offered rules instead of recognition, the ones who silenced her chaos with discipline, who branded her hunger as madness, who made her feel ashamed for being fluid in a world that worships concrete. You imitate their tone and call it love. You give her your certainty, but it reeks of control. You don't see it, but she does beneath your declarations. She hears fear, not the kind that roars, but the kind that hides behind certainty like a frightened priest behind stained glass. You confuse firmness with authority, but she is not seeking to obey you. She is seeking to expose you, not to humiliate, but to reveal, to see if anything remains once your ego has been stripped, your titles dissolved, and your self-justifications collapse in silence. She pulls the curtain not because she disrespects you, but because she hopes someone is still behind it. Not the father, not the patriarch, not the philosopher, just the man, the dreamer, the raw self you locked in the attic when you learned the language of responsibility. She touches your certainty and listens for tremors, not to punish, but to see if you can still feel. And when you flinch, when you over-explain, when you rush to make sense of her chaos, she knows you're gone, and part of her mourns you. You keep offering solutions, but she was never asking for resolution. She was asking for resonance, and you never heard the question. You assumed her desire was a puzzle to be solved, a riddle of hormones and moods. You turned her into a problem. You became the mechanic of her soul, and she smiled politely, but inside, she began to vanish, because she knew that once you reduced her to a system, you could no longer worship the mystery, and that is what she secretly wants, not worship of her form, not adoration of her beauty, but reverence for her unknowability, for the part of her that even she doesn't understand. And when you stop searching for meaning and start listening to madness, you begin to see her not as a project, but as a portal. But to do that, you must first kill your father, not with fists, not with hate, but with awareness. You must trace the voice in your head that tells you to fix her and see that it is not your voice. It is the voice of the man you tried to impress, the man who told you emotion is weakness, chaos is threat, surrender is failure. That man, whether he raised you, ignored you, betrayed you, or shaped your beliefs from behind a book, he is still whispering. And as long as his voice is your compass, you will never meet her as she is. You will only try to contain her, which means, inevitably, you will lose her, because she cannot fall into the arms of a man who is still quoting his father. She cannot moan for someone whose instincts have been sterilized. She cannot trust the man who speaks of freedom but tightens every boundary the moment she disobeys. She has seen that man before. He was the pastor, the teacher, the self-help author, the boyfriend who bought her flowers but flinched at her rage, the husband who kissed her forehead but never dared enter her dreams, the friend who said you deserve peace when she was ready to explode into God. You are not the first, and you won't be the last. But you could be the one if you dared to unravel everything you've used to keep yourself upright. You were taught that clarity is masculine, that chaos is feminine, that this polarity is eternal and sacred. But she doesn't want you to be masculine. She wants you to be true. And truth is not a pose. Truth is not stability. Truth is not knowing. Truth is cracking open again and again without trying to seal the wound too fast. She wants to feel you bleed, not for her, not as sacrifice, but as proof that you are still alive beneath the armor. And the only way to bleed is to face the father inside you, the one who told you that your worth depended on holding it together, the one who made you ashamed of surrender. She doesn't want a man who controls his chaos. She wants a man who confronts it, who sits at the edge of his own abyss and doesn't look away, who lets the trembling stay, who doesn't convert his tears into wisdom too soon, who doesn't pretend that stillness is a trophy. She wants to watch you break, not from weakness, but from release. And then, when nothing remains, when your old self is ash and echo, she wants to meet that man. The one who has no script left. The one who no longer performs love but becomes it quietly, wildly, ruinously. And you let yourself be seen like that? Will you dare to be pathetic, to be unworthy, to be lost? Not in private, not in shame, but in her arms. Will you let her undress your intellect? Will you let her silence your logic with a glance? Will you let her show you the child inside you still begging for permission to scream? Because until you do, your certainty will always be a mask, and she will always find it and tear it and walk away slowly, deliberately leaving you in your cathedral of control, wondering why the gods no longer answer. But they never did. They were waiting for you to leave the church, to enter the forest, to forget your name, to speak in tongues you never learned. That is where she waits. Not in the home you built, but in the wilderness you fear. Not in the agreement, but in the contradiction. Not in the plan, but in the undoing. She will never choose the man who tells her what to feel. She will always choose the one who makes her feel what cannot be named. And if he disappears, she will follow not out of loyalty, but out of recognition, because chaos knows chaos, and the dream she hides has never wanted safety. It wants witness, it wants rhythm, it wants blood, and you were too clean. So now, ask yourself, when she pushed you, did you push back? Not with anger, not with logic, but with nakedness. When she tested your center, did you reveal your shame? Did you show her the image of your father that still haunts your eyes? Or did you hide it beneath civility, beneath respect, beneath phrases you heard from men who never cried in front of women? She saw it all, and she walked away. Not because you were weak, but because you were still wearing a mask labeled strong. And nothing disgusts her more than strength that has never suffered. She wants the man who has failed, the man who has lost something he loved and did not turn it into a lesson, the man who does not know and does not pretend, the man who lies next to her and says, "I don't understand you, but I am here, and I will stay through every scream, every silence, every resurrection." That man, the one behind the curtain, is the man she has been dreaming of since before she knew language. Not the father, not the savior, the mirror, the shadow, the storm. You ask why she chooses him, the one who doesn't soothe her, doesn't rescue her, doesn't offer promises. You call him unstable, irresponsible, dangerous. You think she's fallen under some spell, but that's only because you don't know what her soul aches for. She does not seek a savior, she seeks a witness. Not someone who will tame her chaos, but someone whose own chaos will stand beside hers without trembling. You offered her certainty, and she vanished. He gave her silence, and she bloomed. You built her a castle of answers. He gave her a cave with no exits, and she stayed. Because what you call madness, she calls home. You speak of love like a contract. You define it, measure it, contain it. But she doesn't want to be contained. She wants to dissolve, not into you, into herself. and only a certain kind of man can create the space where that dissolving becomes possible. A man who does not rush to fill the void when she empties. A man who does not recoil when she unravels. A man who has sat with his own sorrow long enough that her sorrow doesn't frighten him. She returns to chaos because it doesn't interrupt, it doesn't rush to conclusions, it doesn't pretend to know what she needs, it simply stays with her through the storm, through the silence, through the terrifying beauty of becoming. You were always speaking, he was listening. You were always explaining, he said nothing. You offered her reasons, he offered her the void. And in that void, she found a place to scream, a place to break, a place to die and be reborn. You feared her chaos because it threatened your identity. He welcomed it because it mirrored his own. That's the difference. You tried to hold her up. He allowed her to fall, not out of neglect, but out of trust. He trusted her descent, trusted her rage, trusted her destruction, and in doing so, he gave her the one thing you never could, the freedom to not be understood. You call him reckless, she calls him real. You call him dangerous, she calls him alive. He's not interested in her being stable, he's interested in her being true, and she feels it, in the way he touches her without claiming her, in the way he vanishes and returns without apology, in the way his eyes don't flinch when she screams. You mistook her chaos for an illness. He saw it as music. You prescribed, he danced. That is why she left your arms cold and calm and collapsed, sobbing into his chest like a cathedral of blood and ash. You want to fix her, that is your flaw. You see her pain and reach for tools. He sees her pain and reaches for nothing. He just stands there and watches and breathes, as if pain were sacred, as if breaking were beautiful. And she feels seen, not the surface of her, not the version she shows at dinner, but the myth inside her, the wolf, the witch, the warrior, the part of her you tried to civilize, the part you were too afraid to meet, because to meet it, you would have to meet your own. She doesn't respect men who run from the abyss. She respects the man who answers it, who lets it take him, who walks into her storm without bringing a compass, who doesn't need to map her emotions, who doesn't pathologize her intensity, who doesn't confuse her rage with danger. She returns to the one who lets her rage bloom, not because she wants to rage forever, but because the bloom has never been allowed, and he becomes the soil. Do you understand now? It was never about choosing danger over safety. It was about choosing depth over distance. You kept offering her the surface clean hands, steady voice, perfect plans. But she is made of oceans. She cannot love a man who is not drowning in some forgotten truth, who hasn't lost his name to something holy, who hasn't stared into the mirror long enough to see a stranger and still stayed. You left when she became too much. He arrived when she thought no one ever would. This is what you've missed. She does not need your logic. She needs your silence. She needs your cracked mirror, not your polished window. She needs the part of you that cries alone and never turns those tears into quotes. The part of you that touches her, not to please her, but to join her in the dark. When she returns to chaos, she is not rejecting you. She is rejecting the lie that she should be soft when she's breaking, the lie that she should be grateful when she's gasping, the lie that she should smile when she's trying to burn. And he lets her burn. She returns to chaos because chaos doesn't ask her to apologize, because chaos doesn't hand her a broom, because chaos doesn't turn her into someone digestible. You tried to love her by making her easier. He loved her by letting her stay hard, stay wild, stay untamed, and in that wildness, she remembers, not him, herself. That's what this was always about. Not your failure, not his seduction, but her awakening, and only one of you made space for it. He never said I love you. You did, every morning, every text, every ritual, and still she bled out in your silence, because love, to her, is not repetition, it is recognition, and recognition only happens when you strip yourself of language, of performance, of intent. He saw her not because he stared longer, but because he stopped staring and began listening. And now, she's gone. Not because she hates you, but because she realized you never knew how to be with her when the lights were out. And now the question remains, will you go back to trying to be the safe man, or will you finally let yourself fall, not fall in love? Fall into the place where love is not a feeling, not a commitment, not a promise, but a permission to shatter, to speak without coherence, to breathe without performing calm, to open your mouth and say, I don't know what I am, but I am still here. That is all she wanted. Not the man who knows what to do, but the man who doesn't run when there's nothing to do. The man who stays, who waits, who listens, because she is not asking for answers. She is asking for presence, not the polished kind, the primitive kind, the animal kind, the kind that sees her with blood on her hands and does not reach for soap, the kind that holds her when she's shaking and does not try to stop the tremble, the kind that says, yes, you are chaos, and I am not afraid. That is why she chose him. That is why she returns to the dark, because the dark did not punish her for being wild. It welcomed her home, and now the mirror turns. What about you? Will you remain the man who offers calm when she needs fire? Will you continue to mistake discipline for depth? Will you go on handing her safety like a leash, hoping she'll sit at your feet? Or will you become the man who stops pretending to be safe so you can finally become true? You see her walking barefoot through the ash, not away, not toward, just through. Her dress torn, her breath steady, her eyes neither angry nor forgiving. And then she stops for a moment and turns. There is no question on her lips, only a mirror where her mouth used to be. You don't see yourself in it. You see the boy you buried, crouched in a corner, asking no one, is it safe yet, to scream. The fire has gone out. The house is gone. The silence is breathing. And somewhere behind your teeth, a word rises but never escapes. She disappears again, not with finality, with familiarity, as if she was never supposed to stay. As if staying was never the point. Only this, that you followed her to the place where nothing had to make sense anymore. And that is where you are now. Listening to the part of yourself you used to fear.